Good morning, and thank you for attending today's Worksite Wellness Lunch and Learn. I'm Carol Battle, and I manage our Worksite Wellness program. Today's program is on metabolism. Each one of us has one. Sometimes we may feel like it isn't working like it should, either too fast or too slow. During today's presentation, we're going to learn about some of the things that have an impact on our metabolism. Metabolism is yet another aspect of your well-being. Learning more about what affects your own metabolism is such an important step in maintaining your overall health. Your health is so important to us. We care about you and your health as state employees. And because of that, we continue to bring you these educational wellness lunch and learns. We're pleased to have our speaker, Katie Godin from Lifestyle Medical Centers. Katie's been a registered dietitian for over 15 years. Her focus is on helping individuals to improve their knowledge and relationship with food and to meet their personal health goals. Lifestyle Medical Centers is an in-network nutrition counseling service. So for those of you enrolled in the state health plan, virtual and in-person visits are covered at 100%. We have dietitians across the state, and to find one near you, log into your state health plan portal, which is listed on the cover slide. As a reminder, everyone registered for this event will receive a recording of today's presentation, as well as the recipes and a link to our webpage, where we house all our past cooking demos, presentations, and a registration link to the upcoming webinars. Please note that we offer closed captioning for this event. If you're interested, just click on the web link in the question and answer to use this option. During the presentation, you can use the chat box for any questions you may have, and we'll answer those as they come in, as well as with Katie during the cooking demo. I'd like to thank members of the NC Flex team who are here to help with questions. Katie has also saved a few minutes at the end of the event to conquer any questions that we aren't able to get to during the demo. So without further ado, let's welcome Katie. Katie?
Thank you, Carol. Happy almost fall, everybody. It is going to be here so soon, starting to sort of feel like it in the mornings and evenings. And luckily it's cooled down during the days too. But anyway, today we are going to talk about tips for a healthy metabolism. And so, Carol did mention there briefly just about services at Lifestyle. And, one thing that I really love at this point, within our practice and many others, is the virtual side of things. So whether you want to come in person, which we of course offer, or kind of keep it simple and easy and do from home, you're able to do that. And we offer a variety of services. A lot of times people think that coming to see a dietitian, you have to just talk about your weight. It is not like that. We certainly talk about all things health. And, kind of personalize your own goals. So, okay. So let's get into it. So yeah, like I said, we're going to be talking about all things metabolism today, but let's kind of talk first about what does that even mean? We hear the word a lot. We wonder if it's slow. We wonder if it's, good, which I say with heavy air quotes. But basically, your metabolism is referring to those countless chemical processes going on continuously inside the body that are allowing for basically you to live, function normally throughout the day. A lot of times we just think about calories. Well, our metabolism is slow, so we're not burning in a lot of calories. And yes, there might be truth to that, but there's way more to what your metabolism is doing for your body than just, thinking about it from a dieting standpoint. However, it does mean, the number of calories that your body is burning at any given time, which your body is using for energy to take out these countless chemical processes, is affected by your metabolic rate. Okay, so we're going to talk a lot about that today specifically. Okay. So let's get into what that word means. What does metabolic rate means, and how do we determine what it is? And is yours good, like I said, with heavy air quotes, or bad with heavy air quotes? That's really not what and how we reference metabolic rate. So I'll go over that too. But just to get started, your metabolic rate is referring to your basal metabolic rate and your resting metabolic rate. Some people use these interchangeably, but there is a slight difference. And I'm really kind of discussing this with you guys, not that you need to go home and learn how to calculate your metabolic rate. That's what we're here for, to help you understand that, in sessions, and other healthcare providers may have some insight to this that you see as well. But it's really just a general understanding that I think is important. So your BMR, or your basal metabolic rate, is basically your metabolic rate in a fasting state. So how I explain it to people is basically if you were to just be and not do anything, not move, basically sleep for an entire day. Okay, that would be, your BMR, and the number that is produced in this calculation that I'll talk about in a second. That's how many calories that you would need to sustain living, okay, within a 24-hour period. That's what your BMR is. And the ways in which this is calculated. So, there's a couple of different ways, but the most, I think the simplest way and most cost-effective way are just basic calculations that are shown to be just as effective at coming up with a prediction of what your BMR is. And so this is determined based on 3 important factors. So your height, your weight, and your age, okay? And so with those 3 things and, that calculation, in the references at the end, I do give you guys a link to a BMR calculator, which is something that we use a lot at Lifestyle to, plug in these numbers to come up with what your BMR is, okay? So it is something that you can certainly have access to and do on your own. But, let's be honest, we're not sitting around just, laying around all day, right? So your resting metabolic rate, although I said sometimes people use these interchangeably, they are different. Your resting metabolic rate does take into consideration just daily functions, which would even include breathing, okay? So it might be about 10% higher. So kind of different for everybody, but roughly, you might look at around 150-ish calories on average that it might go up, maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit less. So with that number, with this BMR, RMR number that we've kind of determined, which is basically you just being without a lot of activity, just kind of functioning throughout the day, we need to determine your total energy expenditure. And the reason for this is that's how many calories your body needs to sustain your current weight. Based on your weight, your age, your height, your totally energy expenditure is taking into account your BMR and your RMR and adding in your structured activity, okay, which is something that we would do in office. We would have a general understanding of how much activity you get in a day, and then we would add it to that number to come up with how many calories roughly you're burning. So, people, of course, are coming into our office and wanting to lose weight. And so that number might change, right? So this number that we kind of given you is how many calories that you need to sustain. That's what that calculation is determining. It isn't determining weight loss. It's kind of where we step in and individualized, we might come up with a plan that's realistic for you to pull that number down to, help you achieve what your goals are. But, bottom line, that's kind of the difference between BMR, RMR. And I wanted to give you guys just a little example here, okay? So we've got 2 people. All right, we have 2 individuals, same height, same weight. The only difference is their age. And we're going to talk about all the factors that affect metabolism here in just a second. But age is a big one, all right? As we may have realized, after the age of 30, we start to kind of slowly each year after year, our metabolic rate's going to start to decline. So I have a 25-year-old female. She's 5'5" and 155 pounds. Her BMR, with all that said, plugged into the equation, is 1,449. She has an average of 1 to 3 days of physical activity, so that kind of bumps her average caloric intake up to almost 2,000, about 1992. And guys, I do want to touch here. This is where things might get variable. We're going based off of what you're telling us here your activity is. So, there are other things, right? We've got watches that can tell us how many calories we're burning to give us a general idea based on actual physical activity that you're recording. Certain, of course, treadmills and gym equipment can kind of give us a general idea of how many calories we're burning too. We're giving you an estimate based on the information you're giving us in office. So this is just based on that, right? So 1 to 3 days average. And also remember, physical activity isn't just about burning calories that day. We're going to continuously burn calories day after day after day if we have consistent activity, even if it's not every day, all right? So just a little side note there. So second person, we've got a 55-year-old female. She's 5'5" and 155 pounds. So only difference is she's 30 years older. Her BMR is 1299. Same amount of physical activity goes up to 1786. We have roughly a couple hundred calories less than someone who's 25. So as you can see, your BMR comes down, your total energy expenditure comes down as you age, okay? And I'm going to get into the why of that here in a second. All right. So let's talk about the factors that affect your metabolic rate, because I know everyone is curious, right? We wonder it all the time. I'm doing all of these things, but I'm not seeing any changes. So what's happening here? And so there are some explanations for it possibly. So I'm going to talk about what these things are. Just in general, your body size is going to affect how many calories that you need in a day to sustain your current weight. When you think about it, the larger the body, you have more metabolizing tissue going on, okay? So you have more calories that are required for you to sustain that body size than someone who's smaller. So that doesn't make it wrong. That doesn't make it, right. It just makes it what it is. It's just the fact, everyone has a size and everyone has a BMR based on that size. And so kind of to tap into, is my BMR good? Is it bad? Well, there might be things that we can do to address your metabolic rate if it's a concern for you, but in no way, shape, or form would we ever think or want you to think that your BMR is bad or not right for you, okay? So let's talk about lean muscle mass versus body fat. So the facts are, when we have more muscle mass, we tend to burn calories more rapidly. It's just a metabolic effect that exists. But with body fat, what happens is fat cells tend to be sluggish and burn fewer calories than most other tissues and cells of the body. So it's kind of the reverse. So, you may hear us talk about, once, you've tried all these things and you're not seeing good results, but we're still kind of not changing up our physical activity routine and we're not adding in weights to the picture. That might be something that we want to try, that you would want to try to see if that could help, because there's so much research and so much that goes into show that those with more lean muscle mass in their body are probably going to see a more effective metabolic rate. This is one that I love talking about with people: crash dieting. Okay, so unfortunately, we are taught at a very young age that to lose weight, we have to do it in a super rigid way. Well, I'm here to tell you, and I'm that dietitian that loves to tell people that is not how I feel, weight loss, healthy eating, whatever you want to say about health in a good way, you are not going to get there with rigidity. Okay. So crash dieting, what that does is it basically is going to, result in us not eating enough. Okay. We're going to be eating too few calories. And so it encourages your body to slow down the metabolism to conserve that energy. So, and also to throw out there, undernourishing can sometimes cause a loss of lean muscle mass, which, as we just talked about, is something that we want to preserve in order to keep our metabolic rate, at a higher rate. So, so crash dieting is something that I try to get people and help them change their mindset around calories and eating and how important it is for us to eat on a consistent basis and nourish our bodies and respectfully reduce calories if we're trying to lose weight instead of abruptly and harshly restrict, which is something that is certainly damaging, not only on a metabolic standpoint, but certainly on an emotional and a mental level as well. So, okay, age. Okay, so we just saw an example of that. So we saw how as we age, our BMR declines. But when we are young, I love to give the example, and for anyone out there that has really young kids, like 4, 5, 6, and you're looking at them and you're like, where in the world does that food go? You literally just ate more calories, like double the amount that I've eaten so far today. How do you fit it all into that tiny little tummy, And so I have a 4 and almost 5-year-old, and I think that all the time. But the thing is, their metabolic rate is so high when they're in a period of growth. So growth, spurts and things like that, you might notice children eating more because they're burning through calories more. So, but we can see it on the other side of things, right? As we get older, we do tend to lose muscle mass, and we also see hormonal changes that can affect your BMR. So those are things that affect your metabolic rate, okay, when it comes to age. And growth, we just kind of talked about that, right? So infants, children, they just have higher energy demands due to that rapid growing years and growth spurts that they have. Gender can certainly play a part. Men do typically have a faster metabolisms just due to overall being, in a larger body. Men typically, not always, but typically tend to be bigger in stature. But then also they do have just genetically predisposed, have more muscle mass. Okay, so typically their BMRs are higher naturally just as a result of those two things. All right. So looking at the next, so when it comes to those hormonal imbalances that I was referring to, these are things that can exist for a variety of reasons. Stress response, that hormone cortisol you've maybe heard about. We have negative responses to certain hormonal imbalances that are going on, not just with, our weight and other things, but just metabolically speaking in general. So thyroid issues can produce hormonal imbalances. We've got, women going through perimenopause and menopause. Those are times in a woman's life where you will find hormonal imbalances that affect your metabolic rate. These are all things that really do happen and really do play a part. Environmental temperature. So this one makes sense when you think about it. So your BMR is going to be working hard to maintain a normal body temperature. That is something that your metabolism and your metabolic rate is doing. It's trying to normalize that temperature. So if you're cold, you're really cold, you're outside, you're freezing, your body's going to heat up. It's going to try to heat up. Your metabolic rate is going to be higher when you're really cold. And then also the reverse, when you, which kind of goes into infection and illness. When you have a fever, okay, your body temperature is trying to cool down. So that's something that's going on with infection or illness, which can create an increase in your BMR. So caffeine, I will mention caffeine, but I don't want everyone to go, out of this meeting today and just start chugging coffee. So the idea behind it is that, yes, a moderate amount of caffeine has been shown to help your metabolic rate. But we also know, I'm going to be, a little devil's advocate here to it, but caffeine can also do other things, right? So it can suppress our appetite for a lot of people in the morning, and that causes them to skip their meal and think that they don't need food. And what does that do? Causes us to possibly, not eat enough, make up for it later, whatever you want to, whatever, your routine is with that when you skip a meal. But that can also affect your metabolic rate in not the way you'd want it to. So we have to kind of think that through a little bit, but a little bit of caffeine can be helpful. One thing that I left out, guys, and I've already talked to the guys behind the scene, I will get this updated like right after the presentation, but physical activity, of course, should be on here. I did not mean to leave that out, but physical activity is a big part of increasing and helping with your metabolic rate. So as we talked about just a minute ago with just lean muscle mass and muscles being worked, they require increased energy. So the more lean muscle mass we have, the more energy we require. So it really does help with your metabolic rate. And like I said, consistent exercise is ideal. We are going to go into all things physical activity next month, and I can't wait. That's going to be a really fun one to present on. But one thing I want to just leave you here with physical activity is that the best thing that you can do for yourself with physical activity is keep it consistent and joyful and something that you look forward to, or I will change that to don't hate to do. I worked with someone a long time ago that would just talk to us about, talking to, individuals about trying to figure out what exercises they don't hate. Sometimes we think we have to get out there and do a specific exercise in order for it to count. And my whole point here is to say that that's not true. We want to do something that we're going to be consistent with. Last couple of things. Dietary deficiencies, kind of maybe not something that you're really, I think this is a rare occurrence for most people, but specifically thyroid issues, iodine deficiency, low iodine diets, those types of things can be an issue, but that's not really the norm. But then genetics is certainly something that plays a part. So, genes and genetic predisposition, that is something that 100% can affect and predetermine, how many calories you naturally are burning at rest. All right, guys, let's get into this briefly, okay? So I wanted to talk to you guys about the thermic effect of food. You've maybe not heard this term before, but it's basically referring to the amount of energy it takes for your body to digest, absorb, and metabolize the food that you eat. And really interesting is that your BMR actually rises after you eat, depending on what you're eating. It can peak anywhere from 2 to 3 hours post your meal. And the amount that your BMR is raised is dependent on the food that you eat. But this is in no way, shape, or form. I do not want you guys to take this as I am being, I prefer you to eat one macro over the other here. Look at the fourth little thing there. The key equals balance of all three. You guys know that I'm a balanced person. I love having all of these things on the plate. But I think it's important to know that, when we eat protein, there's a 20 to 30% rise in your BMR. So that just means that your metabolic rate is increasing 20 to 30% just because you eat protein at that meal. And a lot of times people feel like they need to go on these high protein diets. People come to my office and they'll say, I just don't know how I'm going to get in 110 grams of protein today. And I think, well, that might be really, really hard for you to do every single day. Maybe we need to talk through that. So there's flexibility with how much protein that you're eating at your meals, guys. But I think the bottom line is that you want to have some protein every time that you eat your, breakfast, lunch, dinner, and even a snack, depending on if that's in the plan, or if you're hungry for it. Carbohydrates are so important too. Their metabolic rise is a little lower. It's about 10%. But of course, I want you to eat carbs. I want you to eat complex carbs. Mostly, those are where you're getting your fiber. You're getting that from fruits and vegetables and beans and whole grains. And, we need those in the diet, whether they're raising the thermic effect of food is high or not. You need that in your diet. And then fat. We, of course, need good sources of healthy fat spread throughout the day. It doesn't do anything to your BMR necessarily, but it's something that we need to make sure that we're kind of also feeling satiated and including all of those really good fat sources that are so good for our heart health. So anyway, yeah, the key here is the balance of all three, but I did want you to kind of know what that meant when you hear those words, thermic effect of food, and maybe you've never heard them and now you know what that is. Okay, so let's get into the last little bit here, just general tips for a healthy metabolism. Okay, guys, there's no magic pill. Do not go out there and take a supplement. As we talked about last time, they're highly unregulated, and we don't want to get out there and start going into bukus of supplemental, rabbit holes in order to boost our metabolism. Not studied and not necessary, but these are some things that I feel are doable and they are realistic and evidence-based. So we want to eat a balanced diet, okay? We want to have all of those macronutrients present. We do want to have protein at all of our meals, like I talked about, and focusing on those complex carbohydrates, like those really good fiber sources versus simple. So simple carbs refers to sodas, candies, cookies, things like that, which have a time and a place. There's no rules here. But I think when we give our bodies more of these other things, we just generally feel better. Avoid under eating your calories. So that's why you might want to come see me and talk about realistic expectations here instead of just kind of doing this, I guess I got to go on 1,200 calories for a couple months to get this 5-10 pounds off. Might not be as effective as you think. Weight train. All right, guys, like we talked about earlier, weights and lean muscle mass are really important, and getting in some, light weights, whatever. It doesn't have to be heavy weights, guys. I just got me a set of 3-pounders and I'm super excited. I love to, be able to do movements that I might not ever do weighted, but add a little bit of weight. I think that's a great way of kind of incorporating some light, gentle weight training into your day. Wrist weights, ankle weights. I love a wrist weight though. I feel like a wrist weight, moving your arms when you're walking, wonderful way of getting in and incorporating weights into the picture. So it doesn't have to be hitting the gym for 45 minutes, just completely focusing in on weights like that. Okay, and the last, okay, yeah, so varying up your physical activity routine is also really important. Maybe you guys have heard of something called muscle memory. So basically that's when your body gets used to the fact that you're doing the same thing every single day. And like I said, exercise should be consistent. You should enjoy it. But I think part of that kind of stimulation from exercise and the enjoyment factor, I know for personally myself, is just doing a variety of things so I don't get bored. I love walking. I love being outside. I love it for a lot of reasons. But I also love stretching and I love yoga and I love doing some, a little bit of weights, light weights, whatever, just to kind of change it up, and it keeps your brain kind of happy and your body and metabolism also happy. Prioritizing stress management is incredibly important because, as we talked about just a minute ago, hormone imbalance is something that is a thing, especially when we are in a chronic state of fight or flight or stress response going on in the body. That is something that needs to be prioritized. Forget low-calorie diets that stress you out. People come into my office and they give me, I ask about stress. They say, nope, I'm good. I really don't have anything I'm stressed over. But yet they talk to me in a way that I can see it on their face. They're super overwhelmed with food. That's stress. Okay. That's stress around food. That's stress around, your health. And that's something that I personally like to help people with. It's kind of bring it down a little bit, bring those expectations down a little bit. So can certainly help with the stress part of food. Focusing on a healthy sleep regimen. This is something that, of course, can create hormonal imbalances, as well as when we aren't getting adequate sleep, we also just don't function as well. And so lots of things might change. The way we eat might change. The way we drink fluids might change. The way we desire exercise might change. So it all is one big puzzle here. It's not just a focus on one thing. It's a focus on a lot of things. Hydration, of course, we've talked about the importance of fluids, and then regular physical exams, I cannot stress enough. And the reason for that is that having someone kind of listen to your symptoms and understand where you're coming from with your, concerns, and maybe they do a deeper dive and they find that maybe there are some imbalances. Check your labs, maybe your thyroid is thrown off. There could be reasons as to why things are going the way they're going for you when it comes to, your health goals and weight management and things like that. So I definitely encourage those physical exams. Okay, guys, some references there, just so you have them, including that BMR calculator. And the, moment we've been waiting for here. Okay, so we've got a chicken and spinach soup with fresh pesto from Eating Well. Probably not a shocker. You guys know I use them a lot. I'm going to bring my screen closer here. All right, so I've made some mild adjustments to the recipe. I'll discuss those as I get into it. I'm just going to heat my pot here, kind of have a large pot. I'm going to heat a tablespoon of olive oil in. Let me find that really quickly. My little tablespoon. I've seemed to misplace. Let me get something else. Okay. So this is about 2 teaspoons, just to give you guys an idea of how much I'm using. I used a little bit more. Let's say I used about 3 teaspoons, which is a tablespoon, just so you guys know that little conversion. First thing that I'm going to do here is I am going to add, as the recipe states, some carrot. But I'm also, this is my little mild adjustment, okay? My first one. I'm also adding a half a cup, so it's a half a cup of chopped carrot. I just went ahead and cut those up to save on time. A half a cup of onion and a half a cup of celery. I made this soup a little bit ago, and I just felt that it needed a little bit more than just that carrot, okay? So I'm going to add that into that tablespoon of olive oil. And then the other thing that I did, the recipe says to cut the chicken breast into quarters. Well, I want it to cook a little bit faster, so I cut it up into kind of small chunks. I'll eventually take it out, as the recipe states, and cut it into a little bit more bite-sized for the soup. But for now, I'm just going to heat this up. So we're going to heat up those veggies and that chicken, and I'm going to turn this chicken kind of frequently until the chicken begins to brown. So maybe about 4 minutes. And I'm going to even set my timer so that I can maybe answer some questions while I'm doing this, if anyone has some.
Let's see. We had one question that if you have crash dieted on and off for your whole life, can you undo the damage, or does the metabolic rate permanently change?
It's hard for me to just sit here and say that it's never going to change. No, I think that you certainly, now, is like, if we were to have looked at your metabolic rate personally, which we can't do, but if we were to look at your metabolic rate and see that if you had not crash dieted, would it still be the same? I don't know. Okay. The reality is your BMR is what it is at this point. Let's start from there. Let's go ahead and tackle some of these healthy tips that we can incorporate into our lifestyle to help just give it the best effect that it can at this stage of life. So I really like it for people to kind of look at it in that way. And I think that'd be at least a little bit, I think mentally a lot better too, but no, I do not think that there's nothing to be done about that.
Okay, great. And what can a person do with regular caffeine when it causes a racing heart? Is there any substitute?
Something else that you guys can do if you don't know, I would not encourage you to try to supplement caffeine in another way or, anything like if caffeine bothers you, then it needs to be eliminated because that can create stress and, a high heart rate and just not be good for your health in a lot of other ways. So, if you're into some spicy foods, I did not mention that, but within reason, because I don't like to talk about spicy foods a lot because that can affect people in other ways too. That can affect, people that have reflux or, risk of ulcers or other things that are going on. So, let me do this really quickly so I can kind of see people. So no, I would say what we would do is focus on all the other things that you could try aside from caffeine, right? There was so many other factors and healthy tips, and in none of my healthy tips, kind of to help with metabolism, I didn't even mention drink coffee, so I really don't think that that's a necessary part. I think it's just something that if you drink a little coffee, it may be helping you.
All right. And do you have a favorite macros tracker app to help you keep up with, and keep everything balanced?
Yeah, so I mean, two of my favorites are MyFitnessPal just because it's user friendly. The only downfall of MyFitnessPal lately is that due to it, I think they're just wanting people to pay now for their app. The barcode scanner part of MyFitnessPal is now under premium. And if you guys have ever done a fitness app before, tracking app before, the barcode scanner is kind of nice. It's just, quick and easier. But Nutritionix is an app that I like. Okay, so it's Nutrition and then IX. So I like that one. All right, guys, real quick, and then I can take a couple other questions. I'm going to add a couple more things. So I'm going to put this down. All right, so I've got some chicken that's kind of cooking a little bit, not fully cooked yet, of course, but we have it starting with my veggies. Now I'm going to add in the garlic, which I have fresh garlic, about one medium-sized clove. I'm just going to squeeze right in there, get that out. And I'm going to cook that up within this pot for about a minute. So I'm going to set my timer here for a minute so that we can make sure I'm not getting distracted and cook it too long. So yeah, all I did was add in that garlic and then I'm going to cook it for one more minute. And guys, let me add in some tip here about this to make it more convenient. Rotisserie chicken, easy, right? So what I did here wasn't hard either, but sometimes the less meal prep you have to do, the better. You can get certain veggies pre-chopped. You can definitely get carrots and onions and celery kind of, I think even in like a little container already pre-chopped, at least celery. That's really the longest part of it all was chopping up those vegetables. But since you're only doing a half a cup each, it doesn't take very long. But I did just want to throw in the part about the rotisserie chicken just because that can certainly be a little bit of a lifesaver if you're just, wanting to cut down on time. Okay, so we've got that. Now what we're going to do is we're going to add in, excuse me, I'm going to reach over here. All right, so that's still cooking on a little medium high heat. We're going to add in 5 cups of, I got a low sodium chicken broth. Okay, so whatever low sodium chicken broth you want to use. Got 5 cups. So I'm just going to squeeze that all in. All right, there it goes. 5 cups of broth. And then the spice that we're using is marjoram, which is a nice little kind of Mediterranean infused spices. It's really kind of nice and goes really well with a soup like this. So there's 1.5 teaspoons of marjoram in here. So I'm just going to dump that in. Now, what we want to do here is we want to kind of bring this to a boil. So I'm going to sit here and let this kind of boil up. And then we're going to take it down to a little bit of a simmer. Okay, so I can answer some questions while that's doing that.
Let's see. Is there anything else I can do or anything differently when going through menopause?
Yeah, one of the best things, a couple things. Okay, so if you're going through menopause, again, I'm not a supplement pusher there. I mean, I think I kind of pointed that out. There's others that might, but I'm just not. We do have to throw out there in our clinic. We do have a clinician that works with hormones and helps with that side of things. Now, that's not necessarily, a dietary supplement, but she's talking to people in consultations about hormonal changes. Love that we have that. That's not something we've always had in our practice. So that is kind of a nice fresh take on your health if you've never talked about that and you're kind of getting into those perimenopause, menopause years. But anyway, as far as food and exercise, so one of the best things food-wise is to, a lot of research has been on plant-based sources of plant-based. Doesn't mean you have to be fully plant-based. Again, I'm super flexible. I meet people where they're at, but I encourage a little bit more plant-based protein. Then also, the best thing is really adding in some weight training into your mix, because as we talked about, as we get older and especially after menopause, we're more likely to lose muscle mass. And so when we add back lean muscle mass through light weights, consistent, exercise, bands, it doesn't have to be weights, it can be even bands, just resistance training. That is one of the best things that you can do for your metabolism once you get into that phase of life and those hormonal changes. So that's what I would recommend.
And can too much protein put stress on your kidneys?
Yeah, it can. So
Okay.
yeah, too much protein can put stress on your kidneys for sure. So there's, more in-depth discussions of that if that's something you're interested in learning more about within a session, to talk about how that affects your kidneys and what to consider. But the best thing you can do is not overdo protein, which a lot of people do, unless you're utilizing your protein by, drinking protein shakes after weightlifting is different than just pushing protein all day long when you really just could be eating 20 to 30 grams less and getting the same benefits. And drinking a lot of water. So when we drink a lot of water, that helps flush things through our kidneys a lot better. So drinking a lot of water with your protein, I almost kind of just throw this out there, but for a gram of protein, an ounce of fluid. So if you're eating 90 grams of protein, 90 ounces of fluid. So that's kind of what I encourage for people to do if they're really, dead set on getting high protein into their diet.
That's a great tip. I've never heard that, but absolutely that water will help digest all that protein.
All right, guys, so real quick, it's come to a boil. So what I'm going to do is just take it down to kind of more towards a low setting and let it simmer for 5 minutes, and then we'll add in our next step, okay? All right, but I do have time for more questions.
How would using a plant-based meat in this recipe change the calories or structure of the soup?
It might change the calories slightly. There's maybe not a lot though. A serving of tofu or so, maybe about 100-ish calories, somewhere around there. This particular chicken breast, a few ounces of chicken breast is roughly about the same. Maybe not as much protein, but you're also getting protein from these beans, which is one of the best things that I love about this recipe. But no, tofu would be awesome in this. And you can get kind of pre-flavored tofu, or you can just kind of put it in. This is a bit of a soup that's kind of on the less, I wouldn't say it's like bland, but it's kind of just gives like this really natural, yummy, there's a pesto flavor to it. But these little like plant spirables, tofu chunks that you can get pretty, most grocery stores, where you would see tofu. It's just already prepared, already flavored. You could pick out like a flavor and put it in here, and I think that would be really yummy. So yeah, I think that's definitely a great swap. Easy. And you could leave the meat completely out. You wouldn't even need to add tofu. You could just make it beans and veggies, and then have on the side, a piece of maybe whole grain toast, and then maybe we put a little egg salad on top. Maybe we put a little, have like a black bean burger on like a big bed of greens. I mean, maybe there's a different way that we're getting in our protein, a Greek yogurt with some almonds. I mean, there's ways of getting in our protein if you don't want to eat the meat, or you want to eat it in a different, way, even if you do eat meat. So yeah, that's a good question.
And would you recommend using a bone broth instead of stock for this soup?
You can use really, a bone broth is perfectly fine. It's expensive, but I mean, I just don't, for people that, maybe want to just, try things a little differently than the recipe states, I'm all for that. I changed it up. I felt like when I made this before, I love a chunky soup, whereas people might like more of a broth-based soup. And so I wanted to add more vegetables. I even contemplated like sweet potato, but I decided not to. There's, you could add a different type of bean in here if you wanted to add double beans if you weren't adding in the meat. So yeah, soup is great and easy, can be so easy. It's really just your liquid and then whatever veggies you want to put in there. And then you can always add beans. You can always add like a pasta if you'd rather have that, or like a sweet potato, or something else for that complex carbohydrate. Yeah, so soup is great. Does not have to be hard, and you don't have to follow a recipe. You certainly don't have to. All right, guys, so a couple more minutes on that. I'm just kind of looking into the next step here. So what we're going to do is, it's wanting me to kind of take the chicken out and then add in the spinach and the beans. What I'm going to do really quickly is chop up this spinach. I've kind of got, so the recipe, let me just mention, the recipe is giving it in ounces, which I think is zero help for people. Like, most people don't weigh it out, and if you're buying a bigger container, that's not a small already 6-ounce portion, which I didn't even look to see if that's even there. I got a big old batch of spinach. So basically it's about 4 cups of raw baby spinach. Okay, so I already have some of that, let's see, chopped up in here, but I was just going to show you really quickly how I chop it up. Okay, simple. Move some of my stuff out of the way. Okay, can everyone see that? I'm not used to putting everything on this side, so it's throwing me off. All right, basically, I'm literally just balling it up. All right, stems and all. You do not need to de-stem it. And then you kind of just cut it up, make it small like that. You do not have to have each leaf placed perfectly here. We just kind of create this little ball. So that's how quick, chopping the spinach can be. And, what I did this morning and what I like to do, turn that timer off real quick. I'm going to turn this back around. What I personally like to do is, if it's the morning, all right, and I'm making breakfast for my kids, and I've got, let's say, like 10 minutes here. And I know that if I chop up those carrots or that celery and that onion, which is what I did this morning, it took me 5 minutes, not even, I didn't time it, but I couldn't have taken me 5 minutes. You know, maybe start to finish, getting it all out on the counter, putting it all back. It probably took me 5 minutes, but that's time that really helps you alleviate some of that stress when you get home from a busy work day. And that might have been that kind of deciding factor of, I'm actually going to make this soup tonight. Also the rotisserie chicken part too. I'm making the soup tonight versus let's just pull something out of the freezer or order something. Seriously, it could be that simple of a task. So that's a lot of stuff I talk about with people too. It's just kind of simplifying things. Okay, so we've got our soup over here. We have it simmering. I'm going to take the chicken out really quickly. All right, so which actually, you know what, guys, I'm going to kind of make a little game time decision, because what I did was I changed it around a little bit. Since I did not just cut it in quarters, so there's a lot of little pieces of chicken in there already. Would maybe be more frustrating to try to take it out than just leave it in there and let it cook a little bit longer. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add in these 4 cups of spinach. All right. And let me grab my beans. And then I have a can of cannellini beans, which are pretty much macronutrient distribution, pretty, you know, standard bean, about 8 grams of protein for half of a cup, maybe about 15-ish, 20 carbs, you know, very minimal fat. So I'm going to throw those in, lots of fiber. I'm going to dump that in. And so what it wants me to do here is kind of bring this back up to a bit of a gentle boil. I'm going to kind of stir this up a little bit. It's really pretty. And it's just such a nice, fresh pot of soup. I mean, easy too, very easy. So I'm going to bring that back up to kind of just a little bit of a boil, kind of blending the flavors. And then the last step of this soup, guys, I want to go ahead and mention, sorry, let me grab my pesto. So as that's coming to a boil, so you can kind of see everything in there, a lot of spinach just kind of added in. So the last thing that I'm going to add to it is a little bit of pesto. I did not make the pesto myself. This is another convenience method here. I mean, honestly, the amount of pesto that it wanted in this, which was, you know, maybe about 1.5 tablespoons, to bust out the food processor and all the ingredients just to have to clean all that up, I thought, no, that's not necessary. So, so I have some prepared pesto, which I also recommend that you guys do, unless you love making pesto and you want to make it yourself and you think that's, you know, fun, and I highly support that. But this is just one of those convenience parts to the recipe that I kind of took into consideration for everyone that, you know, wanted it to be quicker. Okay, so that is going to be the last thing. We're just going to let these flavors kind of combine here for a few minutes on like a gentle boil. So I just kind of brought it up to boil and then brought it back down to around like a medium heat. Okay, so it's kind of just gently boiling in there. Now, one thing that's fun about soup is that, and I definitely noticed with, you know, soups in general and this recipe too, is that once you know, let it sit and those flavors really blend, so even next day, it even tastes better. So that's one of the best things about soup, is that it's actually better for leftovers. So yeah, this is going to make, I think about 5 servings of 1.5 cups each, which is decent. And the macronutrient distribution, just so that you guys know, is very lean. So you certainly need something else with it. It's about 225 calories, 227 calories, 18 carbs, 6 grams of fiber, which I loved. Only 2 grams of sugar. Of course, there's nothing really that has sugar in this. 19 grams of protein, which I thought was great with the beans and then the chicken. Very low in saturated fat, just a couple of grams. Let's see, a lot of vitamin A, a decent amount of folate, 200 milligrams of sodium. I mean, you can't beat that. That's what the benefit of homemade soups is that can really control the salt. And so I think that's, one of my favorite things about it. Yeah, so just wanted to give you guys that. And on eating well, if you guys have looked at these recipes before, it certainly gives you that information. It's one thing that I really like about it. And it also dives a little bit into the micronutrient side of things too. Okay. Thinking of actually a tracking app. If you guys have heard of Chronometer, that's a good tracking app if you're really interested in your micronutrients. But I always have to throw out, y'all, I mean, I love giving all the information because people ask for it, and I love giving it to them because I want them to know. But at the same time, I'm not a big tracker. I do for specific reasons. I always tell people tracking is so helpful when you want to reduce your sodium, when you want to pay attention to increasing fiber. You're not sure of how much protein you're getting or the types of carbs that you're consuming. But to go down this rabbit hole of stress that tracking can create on a daily basis indefinitely, I don't really support that. So that's something that I like to talk to people about too. Tracking kind of has a time and a place. And I've had some people that really do want to pay attention to their calcium, and Chronometer has been really great for that. So just wanted to throw that one out there. All right, guys. Okay. Last thing I'm going to do, all right, is add in this about 1.5 tablespoons of pesto. Okay. If you eat cheese and you like a hard grated Parmesan cheese, I feel like that would be really nice on top. A nice, toasted, I love Dave's Killer, a toasted rye or sourdough bread. They even recommend kind of putting a little toasted sourdough bread, just as like croutons on top. I didn't do that, but that's something that you could do because, like I said, it really is a pretty low calorie soup. Something that I did the other day was had a little soup for a snack. Sometimes people, think that for snack, it has to be these specific things. Soup is great. I mean, it's, loaded with these vegetables, some protein. It's nice and lean. So, okay. I think this is pretty much done, guys. I mean, it's been almost 30 minutes. That's about the time frame of cooking that it required, which, as you can see, it's just a lot of kind of sitting and stirring for 5 minutes. So you have to be around it, but there's not a lot to it, especially if you have some of those ingredients prepared. I'm going to, put some in a bowl here and show you, but does anyone have some kind of last minute questions here the last few minutes?
If you don't have any issues with hypertension, is there reason to use low sodium broth or to be watching?
I mean, like general heart health, we do want to watch our sodium no matter what. So we don't necessarily want to have kind of no limit here just because we don't have any pre-existing issues. However, that doesn't mean that if you have a 600-700 milligram sodium meal for one meal that you have to do that for all 3. So I usually tell people, yeah, I mean, if you want to add in a full sodium chicken broth, that might bump up the sodium a couple hundred milligrams, so it might be more like 400, 4 to 5. Then I don't see anything wrong with that. No, I don't. So I think sometimes people find that with certain things, with certain fresh ingredients, with certain meals, they can maybe get away with less. And so I encourage that for them to try it. But no, I think that there's ways of kind of having some flexibility. Even if you do have hypertension, I think it's just being aware of what you're consuming. It's really in a day. It's not necessarily for just that one meal. So I think that's something to just kind of pay attention to.
Okay, and we had one person ask about rotisserie chicken, if it has a lot of unhealthy additives.
I mean, you guys, I don't want everyone to feel like there's this stigma of perfection that comes with eating healthy. Let's think about that rotisserie chicken and what it could be doing for you. Okay. Yes, maybe it might have a little bit more fat, a little bit more salt than a chicken breast that you would have just prepared in this way. Okay. However, we take the skin off, we put the chicken in a Tupperware. We mostly do, maybe you just stick to the white meat, kind of whatever. What is that doing? Potentially saving you from going out to eat, which what are we going to get if we go out to eat? So I like for people to think about it psychologically in ways like that versus like, I have people that come and see me and all of a sudden we go down this rabbit hole of they're fearful and, worried about every fine detail when in reality, that potential swap of having that rotisserie chicken instead of going out to eat was a far better choice. So I just think that's a good way to look at it. But yes, I mean, there's ways around that though. There are certainly organic rotisserie chickens that you can find that might have a little less of those additives. But yeah, I mean, I think there's ways of kind of, changing it up, taking the skin off, like I said, kind of working with some of the whiter meat versus the darker meat if you're worried about a little bit more of that fat. So yeah, that's kind of my personal standpoint on that. All right, I'm going to dish some of this soup out and show you guys. Surprise as to what I might be having for lunch, obviously. Hot and ready. Okay. The bowl is a little hot. Oops. Hold on. Okay. All right. There's a nice pretty bowl of that soup. It's got a lot of yummy, yummy, healthy ingredients in here too. And like I said, lots of ways for you to change it up. You could have added bell pepper if you prefer bell pepper. You could add a different bean. You could add tofu. You could leave chicken out. You could add other veggies. Zucchini squash would be good. I mean, I can't think of a veggie that wouldn't be tasty in there. So, and I know we're a little over, so. Whoops. Are you there?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I could hear you. I'm done.
Okay. Great, Katie. This was so informative. Really, really was. So thank you. And I'm kind of ready for some of that soup. I may have to make it this weekend as we start to merge into these cooler temperatures.
Yeah. And one of the best things you can do with it is freeze it. My mom and I'm so excited. We're going to the mountains, just her and I. We have not done a trip together, just me and her, since I was very young. And so I'm very excited. And I'm taking this soup. I'm gonna freeze it. We're leaving this weekend. So definitely an easy thing to make and freeze if you want to save it for later. Double batch it if you want, that kind of thing.
Okay, great. And to all our attendees, thank you for coming today. I really want to plug our next webinar, which is October the 28th, and the topic is how to make movement more joyful. And that aligns perfectly with our Miles for Wellness program. And Miles for Wellness is an 8-week challenge just to get you to move a little more than you normally do. And the registration is open from now through this coming Friday. So check around with your coworkers and think about being a captain for a team or participating on a team. If you go to our Miles for Wellness website, you can see opportunities to join an existing team or actually captain a team of 10 people. So we will be talking more about movement in October. Yes. Thank y'all for coming today.
Bye. Thank you, everyone. Mhm.